Welcome to the Omnisports podcast. Featuring your host, Bobby Labita. Hello and welcome in everyone to another episode of the Omnisports NBA podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Labita, back with Weeks Don't Matter. We're in the off season, but we're back, and thank you so much for being here. It's been quite a while since I've released a pod, and I'll talk about that in a sec. But before we do, let's talk about our sponsor for this week. And our sponsor, as always, is a fake sponsor. And the fake sponsor this week is Big Pharma. That's right, Big Pharma, I'm on to you. You're the reason why I've been sick the last 2 weeks, and it's very hard for me to talk without coughing. So I do apologize for any coughs, but that's also part of the reason I've not been here recently. So the last month, the cough happened, but we're keeping it, we're rolling. This is all natural, baby. But when the last pod was supposed to happen, only like 2 games of the finals happened, and then the rest of the games, and then I was sad, and then I was sick. So I do first want to say I'm sorry for the long delay. I'm sure many of you were waiting to hear about all the pain I was in during the Celtics wins, and don't worry, we'll talk about that in a moment, as well as the NBA draft and the NBA free agent signing period trade. It's getting crazy. By the time you hear this, there's going to be a lot of different news. But to kind of get to the main point is, I don't know what this pod will look like going forward. There may be a bit of a hiatus as I'm trying to figure this out. Right now, my life is going through some changes, and I'm just trying to make sure I'm doing what's best for me and best for all of you, for all of the listeners. So I'm going to say without much confidence, expect probably a pause. Expect some more pods in the future, but it'll be intermittently as long as I'm in this place where I'm trying to figure out what to do. So I don't know if I will do like a weekly pod. I really enjoyed making the pod for a lot of this season, but towards the end I felt like I was running a bit on fumes, and I don't know if it was more of just me being tired. I don't know if it was just the long NBA season and I needed to diversify my content. I don't quite know, but I'm going to get to the bottom of it. So I do apologize if you were anticipating a pod and you were worried I was sick or dying. Don't worry, I was just one of those sick. Because we shouldn't bring up dying, because we're all dying. And speaking of dying, let's talk about the NBA Finals.
Storylines of the week.
It happened. The worst thing imaginable. I, as a humble Lakers fan, sit before you on the screen or wherever I am adjacent to you where you're listening. I don't know how that works with ears. Anyway, I sit and stand. I speak before you, next to you, in your ear holes, from a place of pain, because the Lakers no longer are tied for the most championships of any franchise, because that is the Celtics, who won their 18th championship, beating the Mavs in 5. And it was an interesting series, because the first 3 games of the series, even though the Celtics won, they were all pretty close. In fact, after game 4, where the Mavs completely curb stomped the Celtics, the Mavs actually had a better plus-minus for this series than the Celtics, but it did not matter, because the Celtics were just the better team and pretty cleanly won the very last game, and winning in Boston. It was you almost felt it. We can hear fireworks going off in the back because it's 12:30 a.m. and it's not even the 4th of July here in Canoga Park, but we are celebrating. But I'm not celebrating. Well, I am, because let's be honest, as the fireworks go off, me talking about the Celtics, this is a cruel prank by God, by the way. The Celtics were just the best team this year. From the beginning of the year to the end of the year, they were just the best from top to bottom. The only 60-win team. Their win percentage in the playoffs was ridiculous. Their plus-minus numbers in the regular season and the playoffs was all ridiculous. Jaylen Brown ended up winning the Finals MVP, as he should have. I think he did a little bit more than Jason Tatum, but Tatum was an important cog in the machine, and that's what the Celtics are. They are a machine. And even when they lost Porzingis towards the end of the series, they only had him really at the beginning of the series, but he was very important in Game 1 for the Celtics victory there. The Celtics are just good. You have Derek White, you have Drew Holiday, who I've said on record, he's a guy you want on a winning team because he's gonna make winning plays, and that's what he did. That's what everyone did. And what was crazy is like, even the games where the Mavs were close, it felt like the Mavs were overperforming and still were not quite there. But when it comes to the Mavs, so Celtics, good job, Joe Mazzulla. You psychotic man. You are great coach. You really have the right mindset. You put these players in a great place to succeed. And the Celtics are just good. And I have really not much else to say. On the Mavs side, I think the Mavs did great to get here. I think it's so interesting, the rock, paper, scissorsness of matchups, right? I don't know if the Mavs beat Denver, but they beat the Timberwolves, and I don't know if the Timberwolves lose to the Celtics or if the Nuggets lose to the Celtics, and so but the Mavs were the team that were there, and Luka tried his best, but he was injured, but he didn't get much help from other players. Tim Hardaway Jr. Had a great stretch in the game where there was a blowout already happening, which felt like a very Tim Hardaway Jr. thing to have happen. You have Derek Lively. Too many Dereks in this series. Derek Lively played really meaningful minutes, and as a rookie, that's like, can you ask us more in the NBA Finals? But I think the biggest disappointment is probably Kyrie. He just cannot play in Boston. In fact, he had lost to Boston in the games that he was playing against Boston 12 in a row until they beat Boston in the game 4. But Kyrie just looked like he couldn't come to task. He couldn't get quite there, and the boos were too loud. His mentality seemed better than it had been in the past when reacting to the Boston fans, but it was just a clear, it's really interesting. You have this really exciting season, and the finals are kind of boring, and that's not me as a Lakers fan because the Celtics won. It just felt anticlimactic. It felt we had all these really cool matchups. It felt like there's all these storylines and tensions, and then the Celtics just were a buzzsaw. And I did caution this, in the February-ish. I'm like, there's a non-0% chance, as much parity as it seems like there is in the league, that Boston and Denver just buzzsaw their way to the finals. And I was half right about that caution of that. While it seems exciting, we have underdogs like, the Mavs or the Pacers making as far as they did. But in the end, it doesn't matter because the Celtics are just a tier above everyone. And that was one thing that watching the series was notable, as I was like, the Mavs just don't have the guys. They just don't have the people. And I don't know what team has the people. Maybe there's probably a couple teams, but it wasn't the Mavs. And Celtics, as much as it pains me to say this, good job, jerks.
News and notes.
All right, so when I record this, it is just turned July 1st, and so just know that things will have changed when the time you've heard this for the free agency acquisitions. Obviously, they haven't changed for the draft because the draft has happened. And first, we're going to talk about the draft and what's going on with free agency right now. So first, the draft. The NBA had its draft this past week. They had the first round Wednesday, and then the second round Thursday, early Thursday morning because of the presidential debate, which, oh God, as the debate coach, oh my God. But the presidential debate forced the second round to be early, so most people probably didn't watch it in the second round. So the first round, you ended up with the Hawks, ending up with Zachariah Ratchier as the first pick. A lot of people pointed out that this draft seemed to not have the depth or talent that some previous drafts have, which we'll talk about a little more in a second. Some teams made decisions based off of that fact. Then you had Alexander Sarr as the second pick for the Wizards. Then you had Reed Shepherd for the Rockets, Stephon Castle for the Spurs, and Ron Holland the second for the Pistons. And from here, I'm just going to talk about some of the more well-known signings or names. So Donovan Clingan from two-time NCAA champ from Connecticut ends up on the Blazers. Rob Dillingham is drafted by the Spurs, but then is traded to Minnesota because it's clear the Spurs didn't find much meaning in the draft, which is sad when you have the 8th pick, right? Think about it. They only found a few people worth drafting. They decided to trade future assets. Yeah, for the Grizzlies, Zach Edey, who was projected all over the different places in the first round, ended up going 9th to the Grizzlies. And then kind of going down, a big surprise to some people, you had Dalton Knecht, who was many expected to be like the 6th or 7th pick, ended up getting picked 17th by the Lakers. Maybe the Lakers one day will have a good 3-point shooter. Hopefully, please. Please, Dalton, please. And so that are some of the notable picks from the first round. In the second round, I'm really going to only talk about 2 picks. First is the second pick in the second round, Kylip Filipowski. Because there's some weird stories going on with this guy, and you know, I don't like talking too much about draft picks because like they're kids, but he's 20, and the person he is dating is 6 years older than him, and like started dating him right when he was like right out of high school. There's some weird vibes there, and like he's cut off contact from his family, and I guess she's Mormon, and then he's drafted by the Jazz in Utah. It's just a weird situation, just weird vibes. That's as far as we're gonna go. But that became a conversation for many people online, and of course the most talked about pick, and maybe even the most talked about pick in the whole draft, was number 55, Bronny James to the Lakers. And this was met with kind of what you'd expect with a LeBron James, with his kid getting signed to the same team he's on. Is first there were a lot of critiques of nepotism, like he's only getting drafted by the Lakers because he's LeBron's kid. I guess Rich Paul, his agent, had said, like, don't draft him in the second round or he's going to go play in Australia. So then, of course, the Lakers are able to draft him. And while that's probably, there's some nepotism at play, I'm not denying that, but there's nepotism all over basketball, you know. So a lot of people are pointing out, you know, Brunson is on the Knicks, and his godfather was there, and his uncle is his agent. Like, there's just a lot of connections there. You see, you know, Steph Curry, his dad, Klay Thompson, his dad. There's just a lot of these connections. People look to Giannis's brother being on the Bucks and has not really played any meaningful minutes unless there's like a blowout, right? And he just there to appease Giannis? Who knows? You know, I'm not here to say it doesn't look like nepotism, but also doesn't mean that's inherently like it's probably not the best way to always run a franchise, but it's not like immoral. It's just suboptimal. And a lot of other teams do it, and they do a lot of other capacities. So it's a really hard thing to legislate out or not legislate, because it is what it is. And you know what? If you can make your star player a little happier by drafting his son, you know, I guess you do it, right? Though some quotes of Martell LeBron was looking forward to blocking his kid in an NBA game, like being opposed to him. So it looks like those dreams won't happen. Now, onto the big, juicy stuff. Because the draft is exciting, but at the end of the day, we don't know who any of these players are going to become. So I find actual free agency most interesting. So we're going to start with some trades, and then we'll work our way to some signings. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I'm going to talk about some of the notable ones. So one of the first big trades was Josh Giddey was traded to the Bulls for Alex Caruso. And there were no draft exchange, which shocked a lot of people because Caruso, even though he's considerably older, is a much better fit probably for what the Thunder are looking for good defense. And Giddey was having some issues on the team this year. He wasn't playing as well as he could be. It felt like he didn't gel. So people thought that the Bulls would have to get some picks, and they didn't. Then you had the Kings getting Jalen McDaniels from the Raptors. The Raptors get Sasha Vuvacek, who has, I think, is now just going back to European basketball permanently, and Davion Mitchell. In another trade, you have the Blazers getting Denny Avdija and trading to the Wizards Malcolm Brogdon and Colton Carrington. Then you had probably the biggest trade in terms of movement or in terms of like trade package. You have the Knicks getting McCall Bridges and giving up 4 first-round picks. Don't know if McCall's worth that, but you got the Nova boy quadretta. That's the term we're using now, but you got Nova Knicks are living up to their hype. The Nets also got Bojan in the trade with all those picks. And basically now the Nets have turned Kevin Durant's trade into like 8 first-round picks. It's quite ridiculous. Then you had the Mavs getting Quentin Grimes and giving up Tim Hardaway, who ended up going to the Pistons. And then the last big trade we have so far is the Hawks trading away DeJounte Murray to the Pelicans. And in exchange, they got Dyson Daniels, Larry Nance Jr., and 2 first-round picks. Now, the signings, and then we'll talk about things to potentially look forward to. So you have the... just going through the big ones. Monk is going back to the Kings. You have Obi Toppin going back to the Pacers. You have Siakam going back to the Pacers. You have Max Christie going back to the Lakers. James Harden going back to the Clippers. Kevin Love going back to the Heat on a small deal. Kevin Porter Jr., who is not on a team, is now on the Clippers. You have Eric Gordon going from the Suns, and now he's on the Sixers. You have Chris Paul, who was waived by the Warriors and now is on the Spurs. You have Jonas Valanciunas, who was on the Pelicans and just signed with the Wizards. You have Mason Plumlee, who was on the Clippers and signed with the Suns. You have Najee Marshall, who was on the Pelicans and signed with the Mavs. You have Derek Jones Jr., who was on the Mavs and then signed with the Clippers. And then you have Kelly Oubre Jr. signing with the 76ers. And then so far the biggest acquisition, and I think this just happened because this was not on this list before, but Paul George is going to the 76ers. And I was about to say how we were waiting in tow to find out what was going on with Paul George. There's a chance he's going to be traded to the Warriors for Chris Paul, and then Chris Paul was waived, so that couldn't happen. And then the other big free agent that everyone's looking at is Klay Thompson. He is not going back to the Warriors. If he does, it will be a sign and trade where the Warriors will trade him to another team so he can get a better salary situation. Right now, the team's looking to merge for Klay Thompson. You have the Mavs and the Lakers, though he was originally linked pretty closely to the Magic, so we can see if that could always be a possibility as well. And then another big signing I forgot to mention, you have KCP from the Nuggets going to the Magic. So you have lots of movement. I expect a lot more movement in the next week or two, and then it will probably chill out a bit until we get closer to the beginning of the basketball season. But it's fun times, y'all. We get to imagine how our teams will be better next year, so they don't lose again. They don't lose so painfully and so in front of everyone. It's tiring. Thank you all so much for listening to another episode of the Omnisports podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Labita. And like I said, I'm going to be probably a little inconsistent. The pod is not done forever, I promise you that. But it may be a bit of a break. It might be a couple weeks to a month. I will try to keep you updated. And it may look different. So this might be the last time you hear a basketball-only pod. It may be this is what happened this week in sports. It might be, I don't know. I'm trying to do something that I could see being everlasting for every week, something consistent, but at the same time, something that isn't cutting into all the other stuff I do with my job. And my YouTube channel has been doing well for my international React content. So I don't want to miss out on growing that as well, which unfortunately I've had to miss out on everything because I've been sick. So please stay healthy, stay well, stay cold. It is getting so hot. And I'll see you next time, whenever next time is.